Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to sit down and chat with amazing humans about their journeys with mental health. For this episode, I'm so happy to introduce Dave Williams to the conversation. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you very much indeed, Matt. I hope I'm finding you well.
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Lovely to see you. Lovely to meet you. As I'll do, just very quickly introduce you to the audience as I know you, and I'll let you do a proper introduction because you know more about yourself than I do, of course. Dave, like many actually, and I love this, reached out to me on social media and sent me a message, a video message, no more than. So to sort of outline some of his story and why he thought he'd be a good guest for this. So I love that. Anybody that does that, you're more than welcome on my stage and my platform. So welcome, Dave. It's a pleasure to meet you virtually. I guess this is still, isn't it?
Yeah.
Virtually. I haven't met you in person, but yeah, great to meet you. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, yeah, no doubt you're like I am. And when you were at school, you actually thought, hey, life is going to be nice and straightforward. You know, you actually leave school, you get a job, you find a partner, you have 2.4 children. Don't where the 0.4 comes from, no idea. But then you actually find out that the reality is, instead of it being like that, where everything's planned out for you, the reality is like that. It's more like a roller coaster, where we have peaks and troughs all the time. Now, one of those troughs that I went through, a little bit about my story, because if you'd have been with me on the 10th of December on 2015, you'd have been entering this square, white, clean-smelling room that was, well, quite cool and eerie, really. Covering about a third of the room was this blue type shower curtain. And as I pulled back the curtain, there she is. There's Helen, my partner, or Hel as I call her. Hel's about 5'10" with shortish brown hair and one of those greying streaks that runs from the front to the back that she absolutely despises. Now, Hel's full of fun. She's the yin to my yang. She's my sparring partner. Hel's the love of my life. But we were at the Royal Derby Hospital, and Hel wasn't being prepared for an operation. She was being prepared for the morgue. And if you'd have been with me on this February evening in 2016, you'd have been sat in my corner black upholstery group with white walls either side and a red feature wall in front of you. I know the TV's in that corner and the bookcases in that corner, but this particular evening, I couldn't see them, because the darkness I was feeling inside was matching the darkness of this non-lit room. See, the reality was, I was totally rock bottom. I was depressed, wondering the point of life. I'm totally lost. So much so, I even contemplated ending my own suffering. But I knew I had a decision to make. I could either stay in that particular state of feeling really sorry for myself, and the reality was I wouldn't be around much longer, or I could make a decision to change, to start to get my life back on track and start living again instead of just existing. So that's what I did. So I went searching for solutions on the internet, but I couldn't find any. Well, any that worked for me anyway. So I started putting some strategies in place for myself, and surprise, surprise, I found that I was actually getting better, slowly but surely on a daily basis. And then I started sharing these strategies with other people, and I was amazed to find that they were getting great results as well, but in a much shorter time than what I did. So where'd you find me now? Well, no longer am I depressed because I love life. And no longer am I wondering the point of life because I live life to the max every day. And no longer am I lost because I've got a passion for actually helping other people overcome their issues and start to live again instead of existing. And it's also a case, you also find me as an award-winning coach and speaker as well, where thanks to Matt, I appear on podcasts like this and indeed other events to actually help people and give people strategies to get their lives back on track. So that just gives you a bit of an idea of one of my stories, but it is also a case of, I do have to say, at my age, I've actually had more comebacks than Frank Sinatra, because there have been quite a few peaks and troughs as far as my life is concerned. But the thing is, no matter where you are, it doesn't matter where you are in life, whether it is a case you're here where things are a bit challenging for you at this moment in time, or indeed you're here, where things are actually going well, but you want to get things to the next level. The thing is, you can actually make anything happen that you want to happen. Because if I can come through what I've been through, then you've got so many more skills than what I've got. And you can live life to the max. So I hope that was a good enough introduction there, Matt.
It was, wow, incredible. And I knew the story you were going to tell in that introduction itself and why you do what you do. And I think you've just shown with great clarity and passion and commitment and authenticity around, your journey as to where you are now. We're going to go backwards a little bit though, because I want to delve into some of those moments with you, if that's okay, Dave.
Certainly.
Around that journey of mental health. So, add in any points that might be able to help some people out there, because that's what this is about as well, of course, is, sharing your experience, your personal experience, and some of those thoughts and the feelings that were going on for you around those events and what really happened. If you can sort of elaborate a little bit more on that. Is that okay?
Yes, of course, no problem at all. And as you've witnessed already, what you find out about myself is I wear my heart on my sleeve, and anything that I can actually give, then I'll actually give willingly, okay? One of the things I want to share as far as my story is concerned, when I was stuck here, making a decision whether to actually move forward or whether to stay there, the biggest issue that I found was realistically what I was thinking about. Because our mind works, it's going to sound a bit surreal probably here, works just like a Google search engine.
Yep.
And the reality was the quality of the question that I was asking myself was, being perfectly honest, bloody awful.
Right.
Yeah, I freely admit it, although I didn't realize it at the time. All the questions I was asking myself were really disempowering questions. In as much as you'll never find love again, you're no good at anything. Yeah, what's the point of even trying? So when I was asking myself that sort of question, like I say, a bit like a Google search engine, as far as my mind was concerned, I was getting the list. So every time I was going through the list, I was just finding something else to keep me in that poor state. So one of the things that I found, and because I've actually gone to work on myself an awful lot more, I didn't realize that this is the norm anyway, but I didn't realize this. I had to find this out for myself. Was I started asking myself more empowering questions, in as much as, when was the last time that you succeeded at something? When was the last time that you excelled? When was the last time that you overcame a challenge? Or when I was doing it, when I overcame a challenge, obviously, yeah? And then, I started getting the list again, but it was all stuff that I'd already achieved. And the reality was, once I started focusing on that sort of thing, then that's where my focus was going. And because I was focusing on achievements that I'd already made, obstacles that I'd overcome, all of a sudden, instead of being stuck here, I could start to make progress, because guess what? If I've done it once, I can do it again and again and again and again. And that was my initial strategy. But like I said, I didn't realize it wasn't something that I did consciously right at the very beginning, because I didn't understand that. But the fortunate thing I will say as well, with reference to myself, due to different circumstances, it wasn't a bereavement, but I'd actually been there before. So I knew certain strategies that worked for myself. And one of the big things that I found, and with most people that I actually work with, either directly or indirectly, is it all right to use the flip chart?
Please do, yeah. We'll explain, because for anybody that's listening on a podcast, Dave does have a flip chart behind him.
Oh, right, yes, of course, yes. I do apologise.
So, first time we've had a flip chart, by the way, Dave, so,
I get that quite a bit, to be honest. Look, I'm old school, yeah? As you can tell by the colour of my hair, or lack of it.
Listening on the podcast, there isn't a huge amount of hair on Dave's head, but that's...
So basically, I've drawn a triangle.
Yeah.
Okay, so look, I'm male and breathing. I like things simple.
Yeah.
Okay. So realistically, when we're actually going through any situation, but more so when we're struggling with whatever the challenges are, but I'll summarize that for the purpose of this as mental health issues.
Yeah.
what we do is what we're actually focusing on. And for most of us, when we're actually focused on something, I'm sure you'll actually agree that that takes some time, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yep.
So whether that's just thinking about it or indeed putting anything into action. So at one of the corners of the triangle, I've written time. So if we're allocating time to it, we're also allocating effort. Okay, so the effort is at another corner of the triangle. So if we're allocating time and effort, that then becomes our focus. Mm-hmm. So the focus is the final point as far as the triangle is concerned. But when we're struggling, what we tend to do is focus on one thing. And in the center of the triangle, I've just written the word problem.
Right.
And that's what we tend to do. And if we're really, really, really struggling, we allocate 100% of our time focusing on what the problem is. Mm-hmm. See, the thing is, when we're focusing on the problem all of the time, things aren't going to change. And with my story, when I was going through my depths, that's what I was doing all of the time. I was focusing on what I'd lost, what I didn't have, what I'd never get back again. That combined with the negative questioning that I was doing to myself was keeping myself trapped in my own environment. And it was a never-ending circle. And indeed, as a client once explained to me, I thought it was a brilliant terminology that he used. When he was going through his challenges, he described it like being in a continuous vortex of which he couldn't find the door to get out. But that's what I was actually in at the time, until I realized, until I changed what I was doing. And instead of focusing on the problem, I started focusing on the solution. And instead of 100% of the time going towards the problem, 10% of the time, because I needed to identify what the issue was, and then I allocated 90%, that's 90% on the solution. The solution being, what did I want to happen? How did I want to feel? And if I wanted to feel different, what did I need to do to actually feel different? What did I need to believe? What was the meaning that I was giving to any particular situation that I was in? Because all of those, when I changed which way I was actually looking at things, when I turned it into solution-based, then that's when I started to make my biggest progress. And when you say it's progress, moving from A to B, if you will, an awful lot of people actually think, wow, that's too big a step to take. And I take that on board. But the reality is, if you think about it, condense it down. And if you make 1% difference today going in the right direction, and the same again tomorrow, it's not 1 plus 1. It's like compound interest. It's 1% on the 1%. So the following day, it's going to be 2.1% or, and it's just going to keep on building, like I say, like compound interest, and the growth and the momentum that you're going to build is absolutely massive. But the key is to actually change what you focus on. Focus on what you want, not what you don't want.
Wow, it's fascinating insight, definitely, in terms of the way that you can recognize that. And I think a huge strength and power to you having that ability to eventually come from that place. Because, when you were in your dark space, it sounds like it was a very potentially dangerous and risky space that you were in at one point, right?
Yeah, very much so. And to elaborate on the story a little bit there, on that February evening, I was actually in such dark depths. I blackened out for a little bit of time. And it may well have been seconds, it may well have been a few minutes. I really got no idea. But when I came round again, I was actually standing over the kitchen units with a carving knife over my wrists.
Right. Okay.
And that was when I knew that I needed to make a decision which way I was going to go.
Yeah.
Now, hopefully, as far as your audience is concerned, no one else needs to go to that stage. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because at the end of the day, That's it. Well, whatever the situation, we've got the power to actually change if we focus our thought patterns into the right direction.
Yeah, no, and thank you for sharing that as well. I really, really appreciate that. Obviously it's that change, isn't there? That moment of maybe a bit more clarity, or maybe a thought that says, actually, I can do something to change that. Did you have other people around you at the time, family or friends? I know obviously you sadly lost your partner, but was there anybody else close to you that knew about what you were going through?
Not to the same degree. Look, I'm a typical guy.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And because of what had happened, as far as Hell's family were concerned, they were absolutely fantastic. And the reason why it took until February is for the rest of December, January, I was focusing all of my energies into Hell's family, but also my own family, as in my parents.
Okay.
And it was probably sort of mid-February when I first went back to where we lived, or Hell used to live, obviously. And it was probably the first time that I started to take time out for myself. And because I wasn't distracting myself by focusing on other people, that was the time that I started to focus on myself. And because, like I said, I couldn't distract on anything else, there was only one person that I could focus on, and that was myself. But it was what I needed. I needed to focus on myself because I needed to get myself right, because that way I could also serve, obviously, myself, but then the respective families and then other people at a higher level than what I had doing. Because when I look back, it was pure distraction that I was doing it, although I was doing it from a place of love.
Yeah.
But when I was doing it, it was to hide away from dealing with things myself.
Right.
And that was the thing. And that took me a while to actually figure out, I must admit.
Yeah. Oh, I can echo that same thought. When I was struggling, I was helping others before doing my, anything for myself. And now I've flipped that right on its head 360. And it now is very much about first person to care for is myself, because I have to keep myself as fit and mentally well and physically well as possible to help support others. You can't do it otherwise. It's just impossible, isn't it?
I quite agree. And the thing, I could quite easily beat myself up over some of the things that I did at the time, because many years previous, I'd actually heard numerous occasions of a gentleman called Jim Rohn. And Jim, American business philosopher, etc. And he came up with this story. And the first time I heard it, I thought, wow, what an impactful story. And the fact of it, if you're on a passenger airline with your little one in the chair next to you, and all of a sudden the oxygen masks come down because they've lost pressure in the cabin, who do you put the mask on first? So me, like an awful lot of people that were actually listening to this, said, well, it's got to be the child, hasn't it? And in this case, no, you need to put it on yourself first, because if anything happens to yourself, then you can't serve the child. So I knew that story, but when I was going through my trials and tribulations, for want of a better term, I'd forgotten the story.
Yeah.
And it was only as I started to come out of my darkness, as I refer to them as my depression demons.
Yeah.
So as I was, I started heading towards the light. Yeah. That was when the story came back to me, and it resonated even more, because that in many ways was the journey that I'd actually been on. And because I've been putting the oxygen mask on to everyone else, I'd forgotten about myself. And the reality was I was craving for that oxygen, but that oxygen in reality for me was getting my own emotions in check.
So true. And the analogy is used all over the mental health world, and we talk about it a lot because it is so relevant to what we've got to try and achieve with it, isn't it? So at that moment, then, that clarity point, I just want to touch there just briefly, and then we'll move forward to sort of where we are now and what you're doing now and everything else. But it's just understanding a little bit more about, you Googled, you tried to find solutions, you didn't find what you were looking for. What point or how did you get to a place where you knew what to do or how to do it then, if that was the case?
Being honest, because I didn't know any better, it was just trial and error for myself.
Yep.
But like I said, I'd actually, had depression previously with something that had happened in my life, although I didn't really associate it with depression, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I knew certain things that did work for me, so I could incorporate those into what I was doing now. Once I made the decision and got over the first couple of hurdles, that's when I started to integrate some of those as well.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, anyone that knows anything as far as mental health is concerned, as an example, they know that exercise is good for you.
Yep.
Yeah, because it kicks off the endorphins and all of that and makes you feel good. So that's one of the things that I started doing. You know, I started running again.
Okay.
Well, to start off with, I can't really say it was running. Yeah, it was walking quickly. Yeah, so I started doing that again, and I hated it, in all honesty, to start off with. But again, because I'd focused so much on the solution, I knew that it was something that it didn't feel good for me at that time because I was just starting off again.
Yep.
But I knew over a period of time, it was going to be good for me again. And because it was going to be good for me, that again was another trigger, but it's a positive trigger in as much as because I'd be able to actually serve other people at a greater level. And yeah, it was the little things for me. And I started, you mentioned a bit earlier on, you know, I started to eat better as well. Well, I started to eat for a start. You know, that was one thing. And I made sure that I wasn't distracting myself as much, because again, when I was writing the depth of things, because I was living on my own then, surprisingly enough,
yeah,
I used to watch an awful lot of daytime TV. Oh, dear me, yeah. Oh, that's an education in itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to love it. I think it was about 10 o'clock on ITV, Jeremy Kyle.
Oh, stop, really?
Yeah, I know he's not on now, but first of all, he used to put the TV on because it was company. Yeah, it was another voice or voices in the room.
Yeah.
But then I also started looking at it as much as, hey, there are some people in their lives that are worse than mine, so it made me feel good. Reverse psychology, I guess, in one way.
Yeah.
But that's what I was doing, and that was the pattern. And all that I was doing was going through behavior patterns. And to make the real change, I broke that pattern. And I started doing things that were good for me instead of not so good for me. So I hope that answers your question.
Turned over to Channel 4 instead then, did you?
Well, one thing I also stopped doing was stop watching the news.
Yeah, but that's interesting.
I went on a news diet, and I even to this day, it's very rare that I will watch the news. The only time that normally happens is if, for argument's sake, I'm at my parents' house and they have it on. Yeah. Because, you know, it's not empowering for me. Yeah, and I don't mean that in a selfish thing, because obviously so much goes on in the world. But the reality is, what control have we got over it? No. Nothing. Yeah. So why worry about it? Yeah, it's going to be going on anyway. Again, going back to what we were saying just beforehand, we need to focus on ourselves. And that was the thing. Does it serve me, yes or no? So no, so news diet. And then I just focused on the things that are going to serve me. And that's, again, realistically, where it just carried on with the momentum, and it just carried on snowballing.
Yeah, well, it's incredible, because you're absolutely right. Care is everything I believe as well, you know, so all in tune. When did you start switch on the light? When was that a realization of, I can do this for other people, I can share this with other people? Was there a point where this sort of all came together and a plan was born?
Yeah, and it's a great question, to be honest, and thank you for asking that, Matt. I didn't realize you were going to ask me that one, I must admit, but it's such a valid one. Because realistically, as far as Helen and I were concerned, for many years, we separately, before we actually came together as a partnership, or should I say a relationship, really. Partnership makes it sound quite formal, and it definitely wasn't, because of a loving relationship. But people used to come to us when they had issues. And again, I was just thinking about this a few weeks ago. I remember the first time I talked someone out of suicide, and I was about 10 years old. Yeah, it was one of my mates that just went flying past, and he was going to be jumping off a railway bridge. And so, yeah, we actually got that sorted. But anyway, but yeah, one of those things. And then when we got together, Helen and I, we found that more and more people were actually coming towards us. But when I was in my dark place, I'd forgotten all of that. Mm-hmm. And then by chance, an email came through my into my email box, naturally enough. That's what emails tend to do, isn't it? And it was to do with the coaching course. And it was when I was just starting to make the transition, in as much as I'd got myself to a certain level, but I still didn't know what I was going to be doing. So the timing was exactly right. So I booked this course to be a master coach, or a weekend to be a master coach, to actually help others. But I crashed. So it was about 2 weeks before I was meant to go down to London. I had a massive anxiety attack. Right. So, how can I go to London if I can't even get out the damn front door, you know? So I put the mockers on it. They were terrific. Tony and Nikki that actually did that. And they both got in touch with myself independently just to check that it was all right, which I thought was wonderful, because we know there's an awful lot of people that actually do courses, etc., that, hey, you're just a number and just give us your money. So it was the human element that I really, really liked, and will love them forever for, as far as that is concerned. So then I went a few months later, same course, same venue and everything. And I was there for the 2 days. And that was when I had the realization that, first of all, that was going to be me moving forward. That I had the realization. But the other realization was, I thought I'd got everything handled.
Right. Yep.
During that weekend, I found out that I didn't have things handled because I was crying so much. Right. Okay. See, the thing is, for so many people, they go through so many situations and they use these things called coping mechanisms. And that, in reality, was what I was using at that particular time. But I didn't realize that. So the fortunate thing with going on that 2-day weekend, I decided to go to the advanced course, if you will. And I also had a conversation with a coach at that particular time. And he just asked me a simple question. What's the learning in this? And for me, that was when I crashed and burned. And it took me 2 days basically of being in bed, just being so emotional. But at the end of that, boom, that was when I knew I got it handled. Yeah. Because what we tend to do is, when we have issues in life, but especially as far as mental health is concerned, we focus on the issue, but quite often it is not the real issue. See, we all have significant emotional events in our lives, some really good, some not so good. And you've heard about one of mine. See, what we tend to do is put use our coping mechanisms, and it's a bit like trying to put a plaster on an emotional wound. If you've ever cut your thumb badly in the kitchen or something along those lines, and you put a plaster on it and you try and protect it, don't you? And then that's the time that you catch it on the worktop, on the door and everything. And then what happens? Plaster comes off and the blood starts. And that's what happens with our emotional wounds as well, unless we get it handled properly.
Yeah. Well, there we go. We are coming right towards the end, Dave. This time is just flying past. And I know we both said before we recorded this, we could probably talk about these subjects for days on end, right? Just on a small part of the subject, we could probably do for days. But I'm just going to throw it back at you just to say, a huge thank you from me for participating, for volunteering to come on the podcast. And I love it when people willingly volunteer. Well, not that I get anybody that doesn't willingly volunteer. But I'm just going to throw it to you. Any final thoughts, comments, or anything you want to share with anyone in the last few moments?
Bless you. Thank you very much indeed, Matt. And first of all, thank you very much indeed for having me. Really appreciate it. But yeah, in as much as, look, doesn't matter where you are in life, okay? If you like where you are, fantastic, great. If you don't like where you are, what needs to happen to change it? You've heard my story, and I'm nothing special. All that I did was, just make the decision that I needed to change. And then I started a little bit of action plan to start off with, but that momentum grew. Now, you don't have to do it the hard way like I did and just do it all yourself, because there are people out there that will help you. And it's people out there that, yeah, and I will use Matt as an example, myself, people out there that have actually been where you are. Not exactly, because we all have our own particular journey, but we have a better understanding of what it's like being in the darkness. And when you do that, then people can relate to you so much easier and adapt the skill set to actually help you move to the good side, so you can switch on the light so much easier. But as I said right at the very beginning of this, no matter where you are, you've actually got the skills inside you to actually have a phenomenal life. Because like I say, if I can do it, then you definitely can.
Brilliant. Dave, thank you so much. Switch on the Light Coach. Go and check out Dave's work. I'll drop the links into where you can find Dave as well, of course, as we publish this and post this out there. I'm sure, Dave, if anybody had any questions, like to ask you anything, you're more than welcome to get in touch with you, right? Is that okay? Brilliant. There you go. That's the invitation. And of course, if anybody wants to talk to me, you're more than welcome to. If you want to record a podcast with me, more than welcome to as well. Just reach out, have a chat. The magic happens very quickly. It doesn't take long. So that's the important parts. As Dave says, don't feel alone. That is so important. You are not on your own. Even in those moments of darkness where you feel there is no hope, there is nobody, there is always a way to find the light. And sometimes that can be just shone by somebody else, or maybe just by your own self-reflection and how you can work out your way through that. But organizations like Samaritans exist today to help support conversations safely, securely. So feel free to contact Samaritans on 116 123, or if you're not into calling and you want to do a bit of texting, you can text to shout 85258. There are also many other organizations out there, but there are always people out there who want to help, support and listen. Please don't find yourself in those spaces where you feel the only option is a bad option. So we're here for you. Stay safe, look after yourself. Dave, thanks very much. I'll see you soon, buddy. Take care.
Yeah, cheers, Matt. Take care now.